He can be replaced anytime. Chris had used me, looked down on me, and scolded me. My pride was in shambles. But one day, a turning point came, and my situation changed. Starting today, I've been appointed the new CEO. What? Chris, the manager who always looked down on me, boasted about becoming the next CEO and strutted around arrogantly, unlike me, who quietly did my job. But his time was running out. Soon, I'll bring him back to reality. So completely that he won't be able to recover. I'll make him regret all the suffering he's caused me. I am Jack Moore, a single, dedicated businessman. Working for a local company, Sons Corporation, I lead a busy life. Since joining the company, I've worked diligently without complaining, and now I'm in my mid-40s. With more young employees joining and getting promoted one after another. I paid no attention to promotions and just focused on my work. Some people ask if I have any hobbies outside of work, but to me, work is like a hobby. A workaholic. I've been called that, but I take it as a compliment. Colleagues, subordinates, and even bosses often rely on me if they have any issues. Whether it's work problems or interpersonal relationships, I believe it's my job to listen and guide them to solutions. Creating a better work environment for everyone is also important. I'm not exactly a behind-the-scenes hero, but if it's for the company, I'm satisfied with that. One day, a man named Chris came from the headquarters. I'm Chris, the manager who will soon become this company's president. Things won't be the same now that I'm here. Prepare to be driven hard. Chris, who is a decade younger than me, is already a manager. It seems the company has high expectations for him. Maybe that's why he can even claim he'll become the president. Listen to the future president's orders properly, otherwise, I'll put you on the fast track to being laid off. Unlike me, he has momentum and a strong presence that pulls everyone along. However, his attitude and words feel completely off. But my work doesn't change. I'll just keep doing the tasks given to me, as always. But Chris didn't approve of that. Hey old man, is this all you can do? Just things anyone could do? No, I'm just doing my job. How is that a job? Even a kid could do that. You're no better than a salary thief. He made snide remarks about my work. It was the first time anyone had said such things to me, and I couldn't help but pause. Look around. Everyone here is younger than you and eager for promotions. When there's someone who can't do the job, it kills everyone's motivation. Just get out of here. Why did he have to say so much on our first meeting? I was just doing my job as usual. Chris would also loudly mock me whenever he had the chance. He called me incompetent, a hindrance, and unnecessary for the company. It was no longer just snide remarks, but outright abuse. Other employees avoided making eye contact with Chris, fearing they'd become his next target. Everyone must have thought the same thing. An awful man had joined the team. From that day on, Chris constantly belittled and reprimanded me. Oh, it stinks in here. This department reeks of old man smell. It's unbearable. No wonder no one can concentrate on work. This kind of task should have been finished yesterday. Stop making me so angry. If you can't do your job properly, we don't need you here. Pack up and get out. Since Chris's arrival, this kind of abuse happened daily, and a dark shadow began to fall over my heart. Even my co-workers started looking at me with disdain. I just took it all without saying anything back. The juniors who looked up to me, my colleagues, and even my boss, all nodded at Chris's words and gave me cold looks. I became afraid to make eye contact with anyone, and everyone at the company became a source of fear. I grew paranoid, wondering if they were bad-mouthing me behind my back. Before I knew it, I couldn't even walk in front of people anymore, and I started to distance myself from others. Naturally, this affected my work, and mistakes piled up. Chris took every opportunity to reprimand me. Each time, my heart would race and sweat would pour from my forehead. Don't spill your filth and dirty the company. At this point, you're just a piece of junk. He said this with a laugh. And I could hear others snickering too. Chris claimed he would train me to be competent and dumped a massive workload on me. While everyone else left on time, I was the only one working late. By the time I finally finished and left the office, it was past 9 p.m. On my usual way home, I passed by a small park that I usually just walk past. This time, I felt drawn to a bench and sat down. With a deep sigh, tears began to flow. At that moment, an elderly man approached me. "You okay?" At this hour, anyone in the park must be homeless. I wanted to be alone. I was about to hand him some money to make him leave, but instead, the old man sat beside me and offered me a handkerchief. The handkerchief was well worn and had holes in it. "Thank you." I wiped my tears with the handkerchief. I thought he would ask what happened, but he just sat there quietly, watching the scenery with me. Then he slowly stood up. "I'm meeting my wife now. See you again," he said and walked away. Clutching the old man's handkerchief, I headed home. My apartment is about a 30-minute walk from the company. When I got to my apartment, I thought about the old man. He seemed to be in his 70s, with white hair, a gentle demeanor, and a kind voice. He was very calm and composed. Who could he be? Looking at the handkerchief, there was nothing to reveal anything about the old man. I wonder if I'll see him again, I muttered to myself. A month passed, and I started meeting the old man regularly. At the same time and in the same park as before. I thought it would be rude to ask too many personal questions, so I didn't. The old man, named Charles Anderson, was in his 70s and still working, though not in a traditional office setting. It must be tough for someone in their 70s to work physically demanding jobs. Health is the most important thing, after all. Health is important, but I never thought it was tough. I love my current job. Seeing Mr. Anderson talk so happily made me look down involuntarily. "Do you dislike your job?" "I like it, but right now, I hate it." I told Mr. Anderson about everything that had happened to me. I told him how I've always been the most dedicated to my work, that this company is very important to me, and I want to repay it through my work. But when my boss Chris arrived, all my efforts seemed meaningless. Every word he said made me feel more frustrated, and I was on the verge of tears. Mr. Anderson, who had been listening silently, slowly began to speak. "I can deeply understand your feelings, your passion and sincerity for your work, and your love for the company. For the past month, Chris had been dumping a massive amount of work on me under the guise of training. As a result, working on weekends and overtime became the norm." Mr. Anderson continued speaking to me as I looked down. "He's a terrible boss. I've worked hard up until now, but it's time to end it. Are you quitting?" I didn't respond to Mr. Anderson's question. I checked the time on my watch. "I should be going. I'm sorry for burdening you with my troubles." "It's a shame. I think you're indispensable to the company." Mr. Anderson's words made me feel momentarily confused. "I'm not that kind of person," I muttered softly and left. When I got to my apartment, I plopped down on the sofa. I remembered Mr. Anderson's words. "I'm not that kind of person." I sat up and placed a piece of paper on the table. It was my resignation letter. I had written it a week after Chris arrived. At the time, I never thought I would actually submit it. But now things were different. I had made up my mind to quit. If Chris hadn't come, this wouldn't be happening. The next day, my resignation letter was in my bag. It was my last day at work. "Good morning, manager. Do you have a moment? I need to talk to you." "What is it? Are you quitting?" Chris responded nonchalantly. "Is that so? Finally made up your mind? I've been eagerly waiting for you to leave." He extended his hand with a big grin, urging me to hand over the resignation letter, as I pulled the letter from my bag. "There are plenty of replacements for incompetents like you," Chris said. Hearing his words, a surge of anger welled up from deep within me. Who does he think caused all this? I clenched my fist tightly. I will never forgive him. At least one punch to this man's face. At that moment, my phone rang with a call from an unknown number. Hey, it's annoying. I stepped into the hallway to answer the call and was shocked to find out who was on the other end. The person on the phone asked me to come to a certain place immediately. Right now, but... I hesitated and turned around to find Chris behind me. You're not part of this company anymore. Get lost. If I stayed any longer and he said anything more, I might really lose control. Thank you for everything. As I left those words behind, I left the company. I headed straight to the meeting place mentioned on the call. It was the small park. Not here yet. I sat on the usual bench and closed my eyes. Everything that had happened so far flashed through my mind. I had just left the company I worked for so long. No regrets. I kept telling myself this was for the best. You don't look like someone who just quit. Are you having second thoughts? Mr. Anderson. I was supposed to arrive earlier, but I needed some time to prepare. The person on the phone was Mr. Anderson. I just got here too, but Mr. Anderson, what's with the outfit? This. Mr. Anderson was dressed in a high-end suit, looking like a completely different person. I didn't mean to surprise you, but I thought it was necessary for your sake. I couldn't understand what he meant, and then Mr. Anderson said something unbelievable. It left me speechless. The next day, even though I had just quit my job, I found myself heading back to the company. Normally, this would be ridiculous. But this wasn't a normal situation. I had no idea what was going to happen next. When I arrived at the company, got out of the car and walked inside, the employees looked at me with surprise and started whispering. Then my nemesis, Chris, arrived at work. What? Jack. Good morning. What are you doing here? You quit, so get lost. Just seeing Chris made my body tense up. I'm sorry, but it's you who should be leaving. What did you say? Mr. Anderson, who was behind me, interjected sharply. I saw you earlier talking to the receptionist. This isn't the place for that. You seem to think this is a bar or something. What did you say, you? Chris, showing his anger, stormed toward Mr. Anderson with a furious expression. Seeing this, I hurriedly stepped between them. Please stop. You useless idiot. Stay out of my way. Chris shifted his target to me and grabbed my collar tightly. Don't get cocky, you. At that moment, he noticed the suit I was wearing, and his expression changed. Why are you wearing such a high-end luxury suit? A president should dress appropriately, and your way of speaking is far from commendable. What, president? Mr. Anderson looked at me and nodded deeply. Effective today, he's been appointed the new president. What? Didn't you hear? This is the new president of the company, Mr. Jack Moore. Chris seemed unable to comprehend what was happening. It was understandable. The subordinate he looked down on just yesterday was now standing before him as the president. You've got to be kidding. Why is someone like him the new president? I'm the one who deserves to be president. The fact that you're claiming to be suitable for the role reveals your true character. What did you say? Oh, did I hurt that high pride of yours? I haven't said anything wrong. Chris's face turned bright red. Mr. Anderson, let's stop here. And Manager Chris. Jack, you. Wake up already. Your arrogant attitude and words are driving people away and causing significant losses to the company. Losses? Why would I be responsible for that? Recently, the company's performance had been declining. And it started when Chris arrived. Why did this happen? The reason is simple. Chris looked down on everyone and treated them like they were beneath him. He acted as if he were the most important person. The employees who worked in that environment grew to despise it, which lowered their motivation. As a result, the company's profits gradually declined. Well, even if I didn't. As a manager, it's your responsibility to keep track of the company's profits daily. Not doing so is inexcusable. It's equivalent to abandoning your duties. I'm not at fault. It's all those incompetent people. He's the typical example of someone who can't see his own faults. To Chris, it's always someone else's responsibility. Mr. Anderson sighed deeply. Talking to him is pointless. President Jack, he must be held accountable. We should decide on his punishment at the next board meeting. Yes, that's a good idea. Right after Chris apologized. I'm so sorry. I'll make sure this never happens again and will speak to everyone about it, please. Don't punish me. Even if you stay, you won't change. That's evident from your past behavior. Accept it. Chris was left stunned and defeated. President Jack, you must be exhausted on your first day. This will change the atmosphere in the company and naturally restore everyone's motivation. I never expected such a situation on my first day as president. But in the end, it was for the best for everyone and the company. Mr. Anderson spoke with satisfaction. But one thing still bothered me. Why me? Why, you ask? There must have been others more suitable for the role of president than me. So why? Mr. Anderson narrowed his white-haired eyebrows. We had decided to welcome you as president for a long time. It was my wife's strong wish. Your wife's? Mr. Anderson began to speak slowly about the past. It was about 50 years ago. At that time, newlywed Mr. Anderson was running around to start a company, and at the age of 20, he established Feuds Corporation. With a small team, they gradually expanded the company, increasing staff with new graduates and mid-career hires, and 30 years later, it had grown into a company with over 500 employees. They had set up headquarters in the city and were about to develop further when it happened. My wife had always been physically weak. She couldn't go out, let alone work. I see. But what did your wife do when you started the company? I was always by her side. Mr. Anderson worked as the president while always being by his wife's side. Since establishing Feuds Corporation, I left all on-site work to other employees and worked from home. So, although I am the president, I've never shown my face at the company. Only a few top executives know what I look like. No wonder I had never seen him before. I had heard there was a president, but I had never seen his face since I joined the company. People around called me the ghost president. Mr. Anderson laughed as he spoke, but his eyes looked lonely. It was just when we were about to expand. My wife's health worsened. When I turned 50, my wife passed away. The sorrow of losing his wife led Mr. Anderson to overwork himself. And eventually, the strain took its toll on his body. Even working from home, my body couldn't handle the stress. He cut back on sleep and handled all the work by himself. The burden was immense. Mr. Anderson shared these memories slowly. After losing my wife, my body and mind were not in good shape. I should have known that pushing myself would only make things worse. It's pathetic. In that case, shouldn't you have appointed someone else as president earlier? Why wait until now? Mr. Anderson began to explain why he chose me as the president. It all started when I told my wife about you before she passed away. At that time, I had just graduated high school and wanted to work instead of going to college. I was never interested in academics and was eager to start working. Then I heard about a job fair by Feuds Corporation, a popular real estate company, and immediately applied. The person in charge explained everything very clearly and thoroughly. I felt that the company had a bright future, and so did my own future if I worked there. I decided on the spot that I would work for this company. I submitted my resume that day and passed the interview. Since then, I've dedicated myself to this company. Mr. Anderson heard about this from other senior executives and became interested. At the time, you were only 20, but your diligent attitude and ability to harmonize with others stood out. I found myself genuinely impressed by you. I never knew I was so highly regarded. But it was my wife's comment that solidified my decision to make you president. When I told her about you, she smiled and said you would be a perfect fit for the next president. Seeing her smile, I realized she was right, and I made up my mind. Is that so? So, please don't say you're not suitable. You are undoubtedly the right person to be president. I feel a renewed sense of responsibility. Just as I finished speaking and invited Mr. Anderson to go, I heard a faint voice from behind. You'll pay for this. When I quickly turned around, Chris, who had been silent until now, was charging at me with a furious expression. You Chris's scream echoed loudly in the lobby. But in the next moment, no. Chris was tackled to the floor by a nearby security guard. Even then, Chris kept shouting, "Let go." I slowly approached him and grabbed his face firmly. "Enough already." My voice echoed through the lobby. "Do you know how many people wanted to quit the company since you arrived? Every time, I convinced them to stay. If I hadn't, you'd be the only one left in the sales department by now, and you could have destroyed the company's future too." Seeing me furious for the first time, Chris was completely deflated. "Everything I said is true. You caused a decline in sales, and you will be held accountable." Chris, looking devastated, was led away by the security guards, who held him by the arms. Chris was taken away by the security guards, severely reprimanded, and then released. The next day, after discussions with the top executives, Chris was fired due to his past behavior and significant drop in profits. Mr. Anderson informed me that Chris, unable to find a job, is now living on the streets. Despite earning so much, he has no savings and scavenges food from restaurant trash cans to survive. With his high pride, Chris is unlikely to succeed in any future job. Regardless, a bright future does not seem possible for Chris. As for me, since becoming president, my days have been busier than ever. Although my days are filled with work, this busy lifestyle is perfect for someone like me, whose hobby is work. Of course, there are many things I don't understand, and sometimes I feel lost, but there's always someone reliable to help. "President, you seem tired. Is there something troubling you?" "It's a very special person's birthday today, and I don't know which place to book. Do you have any recommendations?" "In that case, how about the small park near the company? It would be a perfect place for some nostalgic conversations." "Let's go with that. We'll reminisce about old times." Celebrating a birthday in a small park. I want to cherish this relationship moving forward.
This story is titled, "My Brother Exploited Me for 2 years after I built his company, and my parents took his side. Now they are begging for forgiveness after I made my move." Hey everyone! Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. Hey Reddit, I've been lurking on here for years, reading all the wild stories, and never thinking I'd have one of my own to share. But here I am, living through what feels like a nightmare turned revenge story, and I figured it's finally time to put it all out there. Alright, here's the deal. I'm a 27 male, just graduated with a degree in computer science. After all those late nights studying, surviving on instant noodles, and pulling my GPA out of the gutter, I was finally done. I was ready to start my career, maybe land a decent job, and actually live like a functioning adult. But then my brother, 41 male, swooped in with what he called a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Now my brother, let's call him Jack, is one of those guys who thinks he's always the smartest person in the room. He talks big, acts bigger, and somehow convinces everyone he's a genius. So, when he told me he was starting a finance and investment company with his 2 partners, I wasn't exactly shocked. Jack loves the spotlight and the idea of being the boss. Jack said they needed someone they could trust to set up the infrastructure for their new company. "You're the perfect guy for this," he told me. "We need someone smart, reliable, and who won't screw us over." I should have known that last part was a red flag, but I was too caught up in the flattery to notice. At first I thought, why not? It's just a summer gig. I figured I'd help them set up their systems, get some experience under my belt, and then move on to a real job. Plus, he's my brother. I thought helping him out was the least I could do. Sure, helping him turned into one of the worst decisions of my life. When I first started, it seemed straightforward enough. They needed someone to handle the tech side, set up servers, create email accounts, design a website. Simple stuff, really. But then the job started to grow. Suddenly, I wasn't just the tech guy anymore. I was answering phones, scheduling their meetings, and greeting clients. Then they had me running errands, managing accounts, and even doing research for their deal. I became the office's all-in-one lackey. And the pay? Oh, let's talk about the pay. Over 2 years, they handed me maybe $7,000 total. That's not a salary. That's pocket change. They didn't even pay me consistently. It was like, oh, here's a check for $500, Don't spend it all in one place. Meanwhile, I was working full-time hours, sometimes pulling 60-hour weeks to keep up with their demands. I tried bringing it up a few times, saying, "Hey, I thought I was just here for tech support. This feels like way more than that." Jack would laugh it off like I'd made a joke. "Come on, bro," he'd say. "We're building something amazing here. Everyone's pitching in." Sure, but the difference was that everyone else was getting paid. His partners, let's call them Partner A and Partner B, were living it up. Fancy cars, expensive suits, and constant bragging about their business success. Meanwhile, I couldn't even afford to replace my broken laptop because, surprise, I wasn't getting paid enough to save up for anything. Partner A was the worst. He had this smug way of talking down to me, like I was some intern who didn't know how to tie my shoes. Every time I'd suggest something or ask about getting paid, he'd hit me with, "Maybe you're not cut out for this level of work." Partner B, on the other hand, was the quiet, manipulative type. He'd guilt-trip me into staying late or taking on extra work, saying stuff like, "We're counting on you, man. Don't let us down." It was like they'd perfected the art of making me feel guilty for wanting basic respect. But Jack, he was the ringleader of it all. He'd dangle these promises in front of me, saying, "Once the company takes off, you'll be part of the core team. Your family, so you're going to get a bigger piece of the pie." And I fell for it. Every single time. I kept thinking, okay, they're just getting started. It's a rough patch, but it'll get better. It didn't. The more successful the company got, the less they acknowledged my contributions. They started taking me for granted, acting like I was lucky to even be there. What really opened my eyes was how they treated me in meetings. Whenever clients or investors came in, I wasn't introduced as the guy who built our entire system. Nope, I was just Jack's little brother who helps out around the office. They made it clear I wasn't part of their team. I was just the errand boy. By the time 2 years rolled around, I'd had enough. I was exhausted, broke, and fed up with their bullshit. I decided to go back to school for my master's degree. It wasn't an easy decision, though. Jack had a way of making me feel like I owed him something, like I was abandoning them. "You're just going to leave us hanging?" he said when I told him I was leaving. "After everything we've done for you? Done for me? Are you kidding? You've been exploiting me for 2 years." I didn't say that, though. I just told him I needed to focus on my future, and that this wasn't sustainable for me anymore. But Jack didn't see it that way. To him, I was ungrateful. "Fine," he said. "Do whatever you want. Just don't come crawling back when you realize you made a mistake." Walking away from that job felt like ripping off a Band-Aid. I thought it was going to hurt, but honestly, it was more of a relief. I figured, okay, it's over now. Time to move on. Except it wasn't over. Not even close. Sure, things had ended badly, but I figured Jack would cool off, and we'd go back to being family eventually. Maybe not best buddies, but at least civil. I had no plans to drag this drama out. I wanted to focus on grad school and leave that mess behind me. For a while, everything seemed fine. I'd enrolled in my program, started building a new routine, and even sent out my resume for part-time tech jobs to help with tuition. I included my work at Jack's company because, let's face it, I'd put in 2 years of solid effort there. I worked my ass out. It was a small company, but I'd been instrumental in setting it up and managing the systems. I figured potential employers would see that and think, hey, this guy's experienced. The first few interviews went well, at least at first. People were impressed with my skills, my education, and the projects I'd worked on. They even seemed excited about the work I'd done for Jack's company. But then something weird started happening. Almost every time after a promising start, the vibe would shift. I'd get polite but vague emails like, "We've decided to move forward with another candidate," or "We don't think you're the right fit for our team." At first, I chalked it up to bad luck or stiff competition. But after the 5th rejection, I started to wonder if something else was going on. Then I got a call from a recruiter who had been helping me. She sounded hesitant, almost like she didn't want to tell me what she'd found out. After some coaxing, she finally told me what the others didn't. Jack and his partners had been contacted by a few of the companies I'd applied to for reference checks, and instead of confirming my work, they flat out denied I'd ever been employed there. "They're saying you never worked for them," she told me. "They claimed you're lying to pad your resume." I was stunned. "Why would they do that?" I asked her. She hesitated again before continuing. "They also said you tried to use their name to get ahead, and there's more." "More? What more?" "They're claiming you showed up at their office uninvited and harassed female employees." My heart dropped. That didn't even make sense. First off, I hadn't stepped foot in their office since the day I quit. Second, there weren't even any female employees at that company when I worked there. Jack's team was literally just him, the 2 partners, and me. It was a blatant, disgusting lie. Hearing this was like being hit by a truck. Not only were they sabotaging my career, but they were also dragging my name through the mud with the kind of accusation that could ruin someone's life. I felt betrayed on a level I didn't even know existed. I called Jack immediately, hoping there was some misunderstanding. Maybe the companies had contacted the wrong people, or someone was exaggerating. But no, Jack picked up the phone, and as soon as I brought it up, he laughed. He laughed like I'd just told him the funniest joke he'd ever heard. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Because you're trying to screw with us," he said, his tone dripping with arrogance. "You're trying to use my company to boost your resume, and I'm not going to let you. What are you even talking about? I worked there for 2 years. I built your entire system. You know that." "Yeah, well, you shouldn't have left," he said, like that was justification enough. I was shaking with anger. "You're ruining my chances at getting a job. Do you even care?" Jack laughed again. "That's what you get for crossing us," he said before hanging up. I stared at my phone, dumbfounded. This wasn't just petty revenge. This was straight sabotage. Jack wasn't just upset that I'd left. He wanted to destroy me for it. For days, I stewed over what to do. I wanted to believe this would blow over, that Jack would realize how insane he was being and back off. But I was already screwed. Every company I'd applied to had written me off because of his lies. I was stuck, with no job prospects, and no way to clear my name. That's when I decided to give him a taste of his own medicine. I reached out to a counselor at my school for advice. I didn't even know where to start. She listened patiently as I explained everything, how Jack had exploited me, lied to employers, and smeared my reputation. When I finished, she looked at me and said, "You need to take legal action. This isn't just a family dispute anymore. It's defamation." The word legal hit me hard. I'm barely starting my career, and here I am, dragging someone to court, my own brother. But deep down, I knew if I didn't take a stand, he'd just keep walking all over me, and I'd never move forward. 2 years of unpaid labor, the lies, the accusations. It wasn't just my career he was wrecking. He was coming for my whole life. With the counselor's help, I found an attorney who specialized in defamation cases. We went over everything: my employment record, the emails from prospective employers, the recruiter statements. We filed the lawsuit a few weeks later. When Jack and his partners were served, I expected some kind of reaction, maybe an apology, maybe even a denial. Instead, Jack called me, laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. "Really? A lawsuit?" he said. "You're such a little bitch." I tried to keep my cool. "You've left me no choice, Jack. You lied about me to employers. You made up disgusting accusations. You think I'm just going to let that slide?" "Oh, please," he scoffed. "You're not going to win. You're wasting your time." "Maybe," I said, "but at least I'll make sure everyone knows what kind of person you are." Jack didn't seem fazed. "Do what you want, little bro. Just don't cry when it blows up in your face." He hung up, and I realized something. Jack wasn't going to back down. He was treating this like some kind of twisted game, and I was the target. That just made me more determined to see this through. But the thing is, it wasn't just Jack. Within days, my dad got involved. He called me, and from the moment I answered, I could tell he wasn't calling to support me. "Look," he said, "this whole thing is ridiculous. You're blowing this way out of proportion. It's just a little brotherly roughhousing. You don't sue family." Brotherly roughhousing? Are you kidding me? Jack had sabotaged my career, accused me of horrible things, and laughed about it. This wasn't roughhousing. It was betrayal on a whole new level. I tried to explain that to my dad, but he wouldn't hear it. "You're taking this too far," he said, his tone sharp. "You need to drop this lawsuit and sit down with your brother to work things out." Honestly, why am I not surprised? It's not like they were bad to me growing up or anything, but it was always clear they liked Jack better. My dad had always had a soft spot for Jack, who could do no wrong. He was the family's big guy, the golden child, the one who was supposed to carry on the family name as some hotshot businessman. And me? I guess I was just the quiet one who didn't make waves. Still, hearing my own father completely ignore what I'd been through stung in a way I can't describe. Dad, he lied about me to employers. He accused me of things that could ruin my life. "This isn't something we can just talk out over dinner?" My dad scoffed. "He's your brother. Family forgives." I bit my tongue, trying not to snap. Does family also destroy each other's reputations? Because that's what he did to me. "Enough," my dad said, his voice rising. "You're uninvited from Thanksgiving until you come to your senses." Uninvited? My dad was so determined to protect Jack that he was willing to cut me off entirely. It hurt, but it wasn't surprising. My mom, on the other hand, stayed quiet through most of this. She didn't call me, didn't text me, didn't even try to mediate. I could tell she was torn, caught between her husband and her youngest son. But her silence felt like a betrayal in its own way. Things escalated further when my sisters got involved. At first, they were supportive. Both of them called me after they heard about the lawsuit, and they were furious with Jack. "You're doing the right thing," one of them said. "He needs to face the consequences." But then, about a week later, the tone shifted. My sisters called again, but this time their voices were hesitant. They said they'd talked it over and decided they couldn't be involved anymore. This is too much for us," one of them said, her voice shaky. "We love you, but we can't handle the stress." "Stress?" I asked, my voice rising. "Do you have any idea what I'm dealing with? Jack tried to ruin my life, and you're worried about stress?" They started crying, saying they felt stuck in the middle and didn't want to take sides, but their actions said otherwise. They uninvited me and my girlfriend from Christmas, saying it was for the best. It was like they were choosing Jack and my parents over me, and it felt like a punch to the gut. To make matters worse, they texted my girlfriend directly to let her know we weren't welcome. She was livid. "Who the hell do they think they are?" she said, pacing around our living room. "They're enabling Jack's behavior, and they don't even see it." She fired off a scathing reply, calling them out for their cowardice and lack of support. I didn't love that she went nuclear, but I couldn't blame her. She was just as hurt and angry as I was. The family drama didn't stop there. A few nights later, my dad confronted us outside a family friend's house. We'd been invited to a holiday gathering, and I guess he found out we'd be there. He cornered us in the driveway, his face red with anger. "You need to stop this nonsense," my dad said, jabbing his finger at me as soon as he saw me walk in. His voice was sharp, cold. "What are you even doing here? You shouldn't be invited. You're not a family guy anymore. Throwing your own brother in court? If you want to be part of family gatherings, maybe start acting like it." I froze for a second, the sting of his words hitting me hard. Then I snapped. "No, Dad. Jack is the problem here. All I'm doing is standing up for myself." His face darkened. "You're being selfish. You're putting your pride over your family." "Pride?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You think this is about pride? Jack lied about me, sabotaged my career, and accused me of disgusting things. And you're defending him? What kind of father does that?" For a second, his eyes flickered, like he was unsure. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd gotten through to him. But then my girlfriend stepped in, done with biting her tongue. Her voice was ice cold. "You're a terrible father," she said. "You're enabling a bully, and you're throwing your other son under the bus." His face crumpled. He opened his mouth to say something, but my girlfriend didn't let him. "Don't bother. You've already made your choice. We all see where your loyalty lies." Meanwhile, my mom sat in the truck the whole time, watching silently like she didn't even want to be part of the conversation. I don't even think she could hear us clearly, or maybe she just didn't care enough to step in. She couldn't face what was happening, or what they'd all allowed to happen. That night made everything crystal clear. My dad wasn't going to change. My sisters were too afraid or too loyal to Jack to back me up. And my mom? She was too passive. The only people I could count on were myself and my girlfriend, who had been my anchor through all of this. By the time the lawsuit started gaining traction, I thought I'd hit my limit with how bad things could get. But no, Jack and his partners weren't done yet, and my family wasn't making anything easier. Every day felt like a new obstacle, whether it was more nonsense from my brother's side or my parents calling to pressure me into backing off. The stress was suffocating. Then, one night, while I was digging through old files on my laptop, I stumbled across something that made my heart race. I had completely forgotten about it, but there it was, a folder containing client lists, contracts, and emails from when I worked for Jack's company. These weren't just random files. They were explosive. The client lists weren't just any lists. They were stolen from Jack and his partner's previous employers before they started their company. Back then, they had bragged about how these lists were their ticket to success, the foundation of their entire business. I hadn't thought much of it at the time, but now I realized how incriminating this was. This wasn't just shady, it was illegal. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my mind racing. I had two immediate thoughts. First, this could completely destroy Jack's case, and second, it could also destroy him. I won't lie. As much as I wanted justice, I wasn't trying to ruin his life entirely. I wanted accountability, not annihilation. But then I thought about everything Jack had done to me. He had no problem trying to ruin my life. So why was I hesitating to let him face the consequences of his own actions? The next morning, I called my attorney and told him about the files. His reaction was immediate. "Bring them to the office, now." When I dropped off the laptop, his firm went into overdrive. Within hours, they called me back, asking me to come in for an urgent meeting. When I got there, my attorney's face was a mix of excitement and seriousness. "These files change everything," he said. "We're turning this over to the U.S. Attorney's Office." I blinked. "Wait, The feds? Why? Because this isn't just evidence for your case, he explained. This is evidence of criminal activity, fraud, theft, you name it. Once the U.S. attorney gets involved, it's out of our hands. Hearing that sent a chill down my spine. My attorney assured me this was the right move, but he also gave me a grim warning. Prepare yourself. This is going to get messy, and you need to brace for what your family might say about you when they're under pressure. He wasn't kidding. The fallout started almost immediately. Jack and his partners must have realized the files had been turned over because their new attorney suddenly shifted gears. They started scrambling to salvage whatever they could, but it was obvious they were panicking. The first big blow came when Jack and his partners closed their business. It didn't surprise me. There was no way they could keep operating with the feds breathing down their necks. But it was still surreal to see their company, the one they had bragged about endlessly, crumble overnight. Then the real family drama kicked into high gear. My dad called me again, but this time he wasn't trying to play peacemaker. He was furious. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" he shouted. "You're ruining your brother's life." "No, Dad," I shot back. "He ruined his own life. You could have handled this privately," he snapped. "Now you've got the government involved? Do you know how humiliating this is for our family?" Humiliating? That's what he cared about? Not the lies, not the accusations, not the fact that Jack had tried to destroy me, just the embarrassment it brought to the family name. It was like he couldn't see the bigger picture. Or worse, he just didn't care. Then, he dropped the real bombshell. "Your mother and I might be subpoenaed because of this. You've dragged us into your mess." My mess? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Jack was the one who'd stolen client lists, lied to employers, and treated me like dirt. But somehow this was my fault? My attorney had warned me this would happen, but it still hit hard. My dad wasn't just unsupportive. He was actively blaming me for everything. Things got even worse when my sisters called. They were both crying, saying they didn't want to get involved anymore. "We love you, but this is too much," one of them said. Too much? Jack had spent 2 years exploiting me, sabotaging me, and smearing my name, but I was the one who was too much? It was like they couldn't separate their loyalty to Jack from the reality of what he'd done. And honestly, I think they were scared. Jack had always been the dominant sibling, the one who called the shots. Standing up to him wasn't easy, and I think they just didn't have the courage to do it. Meanwhile, Jack's new attorneys reached out, asking what it would take to settle. It was clear they knew they were in trouble, but I wasn't about to let them off easy. Not after everything they'd put me through. As I sat in my attorney's office, watching the chaos unfold, one thought kept running through my mind. This isn't just about the lawsuit anymore. Jack and his partners didn't just shut their business quietly. They tried to paint themselves as victims, claiming the lawsuit had drained their resources and forced them to close. It was an obvious play for sympathy, but it wasn't working. Between the client list files and the investigation now being handled by federal authorities, their story didn't hold water. Everyone who had been working with them, or even considering it, bailed the second the news broke. But of course, Jack wasn't going to take this lying down. He still had one more trick up his sleeve, using our parents to try to guilt me into backing off. The week after their company closed, my dad called me again. This time, he wasn't shouting. He was pleading. "Son, don't you think this has gone far enough? Jack's lost his business. Isn't that enough punishment?" I gripped the phone tighter, my patience wearing thin. "Dad, this isn't just about the business. He lied about me to employers, accused me of disgusting things, and tried to ruin my career. Losing his business is the bare minimum of what he deserves," my dad said, his voice breaking. Family sticks together. That phrase, family sticks together, was like nails on a chalkboard. I'd heard it a million times growing up, but now it felt like a weapon being used against me. "If family sticks together, then why did Jack stab me in the back?" I snapped. "Why is it my job to forgive him when he hasn't even apologized?" My dad didn't have an answer for that. Instead, he shifted gears, trying to play the victim himself. "Your mother and I are being dragged into this. Do you know how humiliating it is to be subpoenaed because of your own children?" "That's not my fault," I said firmly. "If you're embarrassed, blame Jack. He's the one who created this mess, not me." The conversation ended there, but the damage was already done. My dad wasn't going to stop pressuring me, and my mom still hadn't said a word to me directly. She stayed in the background, as if hoping the whole thing would blow over if she ignored it long enough. But Jack? He wasn't ignoring anything. He sent me a message a few days later, and it was the most infuriating thing I'd ever read. "You've got what you wanted," he wrote. "The company's gone, and I'm broke. Happy now? You always were a selfish little brat." That was it. That was the moment I snapped. For years, I'd put up with his arrogance, his manipulation, and his lies. But this? Acting like he was the victim after everything he'd done? It was too much. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I sat down and wrote out everything I wanted to say to him. No holding back, No sugarcoating. When I finally sent it, I didn't care if it burned every bridge left between us. Jack, I wrote, you've spent your entire life thinking you're better than everyone else, and now you're finally facing the consequences of your actions. You're not the victim here. You lied, you stole, and you tried to ruin me for no reason other than your own ego. So no, I'm not happy that you're broke. I'm relieved that people are finally seeing you for who you really are. If you want to blame someone for what's happened, look in the mirror. This is all on you. A few weeks later, during a deposition for the lawsuit, Jack and his partners tried to claim I had agreed to work for free as part of some verbal agreement. It was a desperate move, and it didn't work. My attorney had emails, text messages, and other evidence that proved I'd been promised payment for my work. Then came the real blow. My parents were subpoenaed to testify. My attorney warned me this would be hard to watch, and he was right. My dad doubled down on the idea that I had worked for free, saying he was living at home at the time. We thought that was his way of contributing to the family. It was a blatant lie, and it hurt more than I expected. But it was my mom's testimony that really got to me. She claimed she had seen Jack offer me payment multiple times, and that I had refused. He said he didn't need the money, she testified, because he was more focused on helping the family. Hearing her say that felt like a punch to the gut. She knew it wasn't true. She had watched me struggle, barely scraping by while Jack and his partners thrived. Yet here she was, lying under oath to protect him. When it was over, my attorney looked at me and said, I know this is hard, but it's not going to change the outcome. Their lies won't hold up against the evidence. He was right. A few weeks later, Jack and his partners finally caved. They agreed to a settlement that included financial restitution, written apologies, and retraction letters to every employer they had lied to about me. They also admitted guilt in the legal record, which was more satisfying than I expected. But the real revenge? That came from the fallout of the client list files. The federal investigation uncovered even more illegal activity, including forged signatures and fraudulent contracts. Jack and his partners lost their professional licenses and were banned from working in finance ever again. When I heard the news, I couldn't stop smiling. Jack had spent his entire life acting like he was untouchable, and now he was completely ruined. He had no business, no reputation, and no future in the industry he had built his identity around. Jack and his partners didn't just sign the settlement, they paid me a total of $320,000, which covered the wages they owed me for 2 years of unpaid work and additional damages. The breakdown was simple. I was owed at least $100,000 to $120,000 for the work I'd done, admitted guilt, and paid me a settlement that covered what they owed me for my work, plus damages. They also sent retraction letters to every employer they had lied to, officially clearing my name. It wasn't just about the money. It was the acknowledgement that they had wronged me and were being forced to face the consequences. On paper, it was a victory, but in reality, it felt hollow. My family was in shambles, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the damage was permanent. I blocked his number after one final message. He had texted me saying, "You're nothing without this family. Good luck out there on your own." I didn't even respond. I knew he was trying to bait me, but I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. The fallout with my parents was harder to deal with. My dad refused to speak to me, and my mom wasn't much better. Even after Jack admitted guilt in the settlement, they still didn't apologize or even acknowledge how much damage had been done. Instead, they stayed firmly in his corner, acting like he was the real victim in all of this. If they couldn't see past their blind loyalty to Jack, even after everything he had done, then I didn't see a reason to keep them in my life. So, I cut them off. Completely. No calls, no texts, no trying to smooth things over. They made their choice, and now I was making mine. Now I'm focusing on myself. I'm using the money from the settlement to rebuild my life and invest in my future. Some of it is going toward paying off student loans, but most of it will be used to build my career. I've already lined up certifications to expand my skill set, and I'm working on a few side projects to get my name out there in the tech world. Thank you for reading till the end. If there's one thing I've learned from all of this, it's that family isn't about blood. Sometimes the people you think are good, the ones you trust the most, turn out to be the ones who hurt you the worst.
Did you steal a junior's patent just because you're a high school grad and you're jealous? That's disgraceful for a mentor. I incorporated technology I learned at Harvard to develop this. Why would you do something so terrible? I was summoned by manager David and James, and they accused me of something I had no recollection of. I never once stole someone's patent. On the other hand, James has been slacking off at work and hasn't developed anything worthy of a patent. If that's the case, I'll resign. Thank you for everything. They must have been thrilled, thinking they finally got their hands on the coveted patent. But this isn't going to be so easy. The next day, President Beck persistently calls me. Hello. Hey, Mike, what do you mean you're resigning? It's no wonder he's calling me in a panic. He knows what kind of impact my resignation will have. I'm Mike Williams, 42 years old. I live with my wife and our only son, who just started middle school, while working in the development department at Beck Holdings. This company sells a wide range of daily goods and furniture, and has recently been focusing on handling caregiving products. The reason is that as the company's workforce ages, the demand for caregiving products is increasing. So, the development department has been diligently working on developing these products every day. Although I didn't go to college, I've been working at this company ever since I graduated from high school. Because of this, I have a deep understanding of the company's operations and am often appointed as a mentor for new employees. While teaching various new employees, I believe I've earned the trust of many of them. Therefore, building relationships with new employees is one of the joys of my job. However, this time, the new employee I'm in charge of is not easy to deal with.
James, what is it?
The person who responded in a lackluster voice was James Smith. He looks a bit older because he often slacks off, but he is a fresh graduate starting work this year. I told you to get this job done. Yeah, can't you do it, Mike? He says he's busy, but he's just finishing the bare minimum and then slacking off the rest of the time. I tell him, who is acting nonchalant. I don't want to say this, but if you keep deliberately slacking off, HR will take action against you. The company can't easily fire people, so it's fine. Maybe our high school grad like you wouldn't understand that. He's a cunning guy in situations like this. Seeing him completely unashamed, I couldn't help but sigh. The truth is, James is a Harvard grad. That might be why he has such an arrogant attitude toward me, a high school grad who joined this company. I once talked to our development department manager, David, about James's attitude. However, no matter how many times I consulted him, he wouldn't take me seriously because I'm a high school grad. He's just started. This is normal for now. Yes, he's a new hire, but even considering that, this is too much. With a high school grad as his mentor, no wonder he doesn't listen. Maybe you should ask HR to change the mentor. Beck Holdings does hire high school graduates. But some employees look down on high school grads, and manager David is one of them. So, he was no help at all, and I often had to solve problems on my own if anything troublesome came up. Well, do your best. If you want to change mentors, go ask yourself. I'll leave it to you. Understood. Even after consulting him, manager David completely ignored me and walked away. Should I ask to change mentors? While pondering this, I continued with my development work. I am in charge of developing the company's prioritized bathing aid equipment for caregiving. This equipment is based on ideas that came to me while helping care for my grandparents. It's designed to make the heavy task of bathing assistance easier, and I've already patented the mechanism. Since it significantly reduces the burden on both the elderly and caregivers. We've already secured orders for 1,000 units for care facilities across the US. Although the manufacturing for the current orders is complete, I'm working on fine-tuning the design for future improvements. Suddenly, James calls out to me. Hey, what are you working on? James, this is bathing aid equipment. For caregiving. Yeah, the demand for caregiving products is rapidly increasing. Our company is focusing on this sector too. James, for once, seemed interested in my work. For the first time, I felt like I was doing my job as his mentor. How does it work? This is how. Hoping this would be his first step towards taking work seriously, I explained how to use it. When he saw the platform move with the press of a button, James looked impressed. This makes bathing assistance easier. It's been extremely well received in the field. It's really convenient. This is going to sell well. Yeah, other companies haven't offered anything like this yet. That's why we've already secured deals with many care facilities. I see. Listening to my explanation, James gave a sly smile. He seemed impressed at first, but then his smile turned unsettling. I wondered if he was planning something, but brushed off the thought. Anyway, let's get back to work, James. Can you take care of? I'm too busy for that, seriously. After my usual interaction with James, I finished my work. A week passed without incident. Then, I was called to the meeting room by Manager David. When I arrived, not only was Manager David there, but James was also smiling smugly, giving me a bad feeling. Wondering what they were up to, I asked, "Is something wrong?" Manager David said something unbelievable. "Did you steal a junior's patent just because you're a high school grad and jealous? That's disgraceful for a mentor. I incorporated technology I learned at Harvard to develop this. Why would you do something so terrible?" "What are you talking about?" "They summoned me just to make this baseless accusation. Beck Holdings encourages its employees to develop new ideas, allowing them to patent their innovations under their own names. I had applied for patents myself, but I have never stolen anyone's patent. On the other hand, James has been slacking off and hasn't developed anything worthy of a patent. James hasn't developed anything worthy of a patent. See, this is what he says, Manager. I finished that caregiving equipment. It's useless to feign ignorance now. There's no way you could have completed that caregiving equipment." Caregiving equipment, you say? It seems they're talking about the bathing aid equipment. Then, I understood their intent. A week ago, James saw my development. He realized that this invention was groundbreaking and would generate significant profit. If he could get the patent under his name, he could make a lot of money from the royalties. That's why the two of them are trying to take the patent from me. Manager David, you know I've been working on that equipment all along. Right. But recently, hasn't he been advancing it? That's right. My unreliable high school grad mentor was struggling with the development, so I, a Harvard grad, helped him out. James chuckled. There's no truth to this, but somehow the story is that he took over my development. Isn't that right? In that case, shouldn't the rights to the development belong to James? He handled the crucial parts of this project. It's not right for you to take credit. You say that, but James had nothing to do with this development. I led this project and managed all its progress. James didn't contribute at all. I argue desperately. Then, James speaks arrogantly. You're being pathetic, senpai. I used my Harvard education to bring this to completion, and you want to ignore that. Isn't that dishonest? This caregiving equipment will become one of our main products. This patent will be valuable for many companies' development. I understand why you want it, but taking it from me is unacceptable. The person who developed it should reap the benefits. Who's trying to steal the patent here? I spent a lot of time developing this, and you're the ones trying to take it under false pretenses. You're the ones being unreasonable. Do I have to spell it out? We're telling you to hand over your patent. It seems all this back and forth was just a prelude to taking the patent from me by force. Seeing that I wouldn't back down, they started being direct. Why should I have to do that? It's a waste to let a high school grad keep that patent. You should stick to simple tasks. Manager David sneered at me, and James added insult to injury. From now on, I'll apply for the patent on that equipment. Then, the royalties from the technology used in that equipment will be mine. I won't give you, who always criticized me, a single cent. I don't recall ever criticizing you. If you want it, here's what you need. James said, making a circle with his fingers. Seeing his vulgar gesture made me feel disgusted. It seems they're saying that if I want the patent back, I have to pay. They're trying to extort money from me in exchange for the patent. If you pay me, I'll give you back the rights to this patent. But then again, a high school grad might not even know how to file a patent application. While you figure it out, we might just go ahead and file it ourselves. Haha. I created this bathing aid equipment to make the increasingly tough caregiving environment a bit easier. That's why many care facilities have already signed contracts, and a large number of units are set for delivery. The technology I developed will be crucial in manufacturing many future products. I never thought my development would be trampled on by having the patent stolen. If they are determined to do this, I have my own plans. I've always felt dissatisfied working in this development department. James, a new hire, is trying to steal my patent, and Manager David dismisses every consultation I make. Now, they've teamed up to take the patent from me. I can't work at a company where employees dedicated to development are so mistreated just because they're high school grads. If that's the case, I'll resign. Thank you for everything. They didn't expect me to actually quit, and they were surprised. Then they started laughing. So, you're taking responsibility for stealing the patent by resigning. You finally get it. Well, thank you for everything up till now. They must be thrilled, thinking they've finally gotten their hands on the coveted patent. But it's not going to be that simple. They'll soon regret making me resign. The next day, I was relaxing at home. I knew the phone would ring about the patent. Sure enough, before noon, my phone started ringing non-stop. The caller ID showed that it was President Beck of Beck Holdings, persistently calling me. I had been ignoring the calls, but since it kept ringing, I decided to answer. Hello. Hey Mike, what do you mean you're resigning? It's no wonder he's calling me in a panic. He understands the consequences of my resignation. If you resign, what will happen to the patents used in that equipment? He then told me what had happened at the company after I resigned. Yesterday, after I left, James brought the patent application documents to President Beck. Taking the documents, President Beck was suspicious. What is this patent application? I finished that caregiving equipment, so I thought I'd apply for the patent. At Beck Holdings, employees can apply for patents through the company for inventions they develop individually. In return, the company can use the technology without paying royalties as long as the employee remains employed. That's the company policy. The mechanism of that caregiving equipment is certainly innovative. Right, there's no doubt the patent will be granted if we apply. James spoke confidently. It's fine. Since this company has been good to me, I'll set the royalty fee at 1% of sales. Don't be ridiculous. Excuse me. President Beck told James, who was speaking boastfully without understanding the company policy. Mike has already applied for and received approval for this patent. What Mike? Senpai did. He's already applied for the patent. Hearing President Beck's words, they both panicked. They underestimated me because I'm a high school grad. They never thought I had already applied for the patent. Their plan to oust me and steal the patent was now easily thwarted. It would have been better if they had backed down here. But James couldn't let it go and started to plead. No, that's not right. I finished that caregiving equipment. You finished it? I integrated technology I learned at Harvard to create this caregiving equipment. That's why it's such an innovative product. But Mike Senpai took all the credit. James spoke proudly. But the more he talked, the deeper the frown on President Beck's face grew. James. He doesn't get any recognition because he's just a high school grad. This project has been in development for 5 years. 5 years. Hearing President Beck's words, James turned pale. Wasn't this project started a few months ago? Do you really think that? You're part of the development department, yet you underestimate the development process. Glaring at James, President Beck continued. Product development is not that simple. For this caregiving equipment, I conducted numerous interviews at facilities. Based on that, I meticulously repeated prototypes and considered market trends to complete it. That's why the development took so much time. 5 years ago, you hadn't even joined our company, let alone entered college. So how could you have used the technology you learned at Harvard? Well, that is. It's clear that Mike is the leader of this development. Do you still claim you have patent rights? Under President Beck's questioning, James began to sweat profusely. His plan to steal the patent and profit from it had completely backfired. Then, as if to blame Manager David for this situation, James started complaining. "Wait, Manager David, you didn't tell me about this." "I didn't know either." "Manager, it seems Manager David wasn't aware that I had applied for the patent. He had always dismissed me because I was a high school grad. Now, he was facing the consequences of that attitude." Sensing something was off from their conversation, President Beck asked, "Where is Mike?" Well, James and Manager David exchanged glances, and then James answered, "He resigned." What? President Beck immediately understood the gravity of the situation and was shocked. Unlike before, he now appeared very anxious. "Why did that happen?" "Well, that is. Without him, we can't use the patent for that caregiving equipment. We won't be able to deliver the 1,000 units already ordered." 1,000 units? If I don't return, they won't be able to deliver those 1,000 units. They can't sell products using the patent without permission. The sales department worked hard to secure those contracts, and the high demand for products that is bathing assistants led many care facilities to place orders. "I didn't know either." "The delivery is in just 2 weeks. Without him, we can't sell the products that use this patent." That is. Maybe we could sell them without anyone noticing." Manager David's murmured comment enraged President Beck. "Absolutely not. Selling products that infringe on a patent is out of the question. We'd not only get sued for patent infringement, but we'd also lose the trust of our clients. What have you been doing in the development department all these years?" Disregarding the importance of patents only made President Beck angrier. Anyone who's worked in development for decades should understand the significance of intellectual property. "Enough. You two are dismissed." "Yes." "Understood. That's why President Beck reached out to me, desperate to secure the patent rights. If you resign, we'll be in big trouble. The technology used in the caregiving equipment will become unusable, yes. If you understand that, then why? Because they tried to steal my patent just because I'm a high school grad. I decided I can't work at a company like this anymore. I had repeatedly asked Manager David to do something about James. However, because I was just a high school grad, they never took me seriously. I can no longer stay at a company where someone like that is a manager. I'm sorry, but I have no intention of returning. My resignation has already been accepted. Right. Goodbye." Mike, I knew they'd be in trouble without me. But I was furious with those two for trying to steal the credit for my 5 years of work. I didn't care if the product couldn't be delivered. I hung up the phone. Later, Manager David called, probably after hearing from President Beck. "Hey, you, why didn't you tell me you already applied for the patent?" "It's a bit late for that." Of course, I had reported the patent application to him as my supervisor. But he probably didn't listen because I was just a high school grad. That's why he forgot I had applied for the patent related to the caregiving equipment. "Weren't you going to apply for the patent? Go ahead, do as you please." "Damn it, you knew this would happen if you resigned, didn't you?" "Yes. It was obvious they'd be in trouble without the patent rights if I left. But this happened because Manager David and the others tried to steal the credit for my development. If they had just been lazy, it would have been one thing, but trying to steal the patent was despicable. Listen seriously, if this continues, our company will be in serious trouble. We might even go bankrupt if we lose trust." "So what?" "You." Hearing my indifferent response made Manager David even angrier. But I had no intention of helping him out of his predicament. "You were the ones who never listened to me. I had repeatedly consulted him about James's behavior and asserted that I developed the caregiving equipment, but they never acknowledged it. Just come back. If you don't, We won't be able to make the delivery. The delivery is in 2 weeks. It's too late to change the schedule now. Moreover, it would be difficult to remake the products without using the patent. They have no choice but to bring me back. Manager David shouted furiously. We'll proceed with the delivery. Is that fine with you? I doubt the president would force the delivery, but if you do, I'll sue for patent infringement. You're taking advantage of the situation. Goodbye. I didn't see any point in continuing the conversation, so I hung up. Later, probably pressured by Manager David and President Beck, James called me too. Don't mess with me. If you'd already applied for the patent, why didn't you say so? Why should I have to tell you? It was exasperating to hear the same thing from him. They underestimated me because I'm a high school grad, assuming I wouldn't have the knowledge to apply for a patent. That's why they thought they could easily claim the patent under their names. However, I've been working in the development department of this company for a long time. Of course, I understood the employment regulations regarding patent applications. You try to steal the work I've been developing all along, even though you haven't done any work at all. I'm a Harvard grad, of course. I'm superior to you. A high school grad, you should just hand over the credit. Sure, education is important, but it's not everything in the real world. His irrational thinking explained why he kept slacking off, and I sighed in exasperation. In any case, it didn't matter to me anymore since I had already quit. If you say the development is yours, go ahead and apply for the patent again. So, there's no problem without me, right? Well, that's... With a talented Harvard grad like you, the work should be fine. Good luck. Hey. With that, I hung up the phone. I hoped that would be the end of it, but of course it wasn't. When the delivery date was just a week away, the products were already manufactured. If they need to apologize to the clients, they need to act now. But cancelling the delivery at this point is not realistic. It should be considered a last resort if all else fails. So, I was called back to Beck Holdings once again. Initially, I had no intention of coming. However, President Beck had given me a chance by hiring me, a high school grad, and I felt indebted to him. So, after cooling off, I didn't want to cause him any more trouble. I'm truly sorry, Mike. We're sorry. We deeply apologize. I was surprised that they genuinely apologized. It seems they finally understood the gravity of the situation. President Beck must have given them a stern talking to. No problem, so what happened after that? Nothing has changed since then. It's impossible to remake the products now, and going around apologizing to the clients for the non-delivery is. In any case, Beck Holdings' reputation would inevitably plummet if this continues. It could even lead to bankruptcy. The three of them were anxious about how to get permission to use the patent. President Beck sighed deeply. I understand why you're angry. James and Manager David will be fired, so could you please come back? What? What do you mean, President? The two of them burst into anger. It seems they hadn't been informed about their termination. Given their mistakes, being fired is justified, but they were still shouting in protest. We weren't told about this. We've contributed so much. How can you say that? This decision is final. President Beck began speaking, visibly frustrated. James, I've heard about your usual behavior. Usual behavior? James's voice trembled as he repeated the words, seemingly aware of his actions. Yes, I wanted to give you some time since you're a new hire. But you've been flaunting your Harvard degree and slacking off at work. James barely completed the minimum tasks and then shirked his responsibilities. Being a new hire and a Harvard grad, he was initially overlooked, but his behavior was almost tantamount to theft. Many employees reported their dissatisfaction with him. And now, trying to steal a patent. Slacking off could have been addressed with guidance. However, plotting to steal a patent and forcing me to resign. resulting in the inability to deliver 1,000 units, was a serious issue. James's actions caused significant damage to the company's operations, and President Beck could no longer ignore his behavior. He then turned to Manager David. "Manager David, you're also at fault. I've heard there have been significant issues with your work attitude as well." "That's not true. You've also been stealing credit from your subordinates and irresponsibly neglecting them. It seems the other employees in the development department felt the same way I did. Even when reports were made about James, Manager David did nothing. On the contrary, he colluded with James to steal the patent. Such a manager deserves to be punished. We cannot keep such individuals in our company." Suddenly, Manager David pointed at James and began to accuse him. "It's all his fault." "What? If he hadn't lured me into this, I wouldn't have." James was shocked, clearly not expecting Manager David to shift the blame onto him. It seems Manager David chose to betray James to save himself. He took 4 years off to get into Harvard and wanted to make money to prove himself to his family. Don't say that. While James did graduate from Harvard, it turns out he had a rather complicated background. Spending 4 years trying to get into Harvard must have caused his family a lot of trouble. That's probably why he plotted this scheme to prove himself to them. Still, being 26 as a new graduate explains why he looks older. James, not backing down, counterattacked. "Well, Manager David, you spent too much money on women, and now you're about to be kicked out of your house." Hey, apparently, Manager David had been indulging in affairs, depleting his family's savings. To make up for it, he needed money, which led him to gamble on stealing the patent for a quick fortune. Watching them argue so disgracefully over such selfish motives, I couldn't help but feel disgusted. They kept blaming each other so much that I finally spoke up. "In any case, do you two realize what you've done?" "Well, Seeing how furious I was, they trembled in fear. Then, I told them what I had wanted to say all along. "Do you understand how it feels to have something you've spent 5 years developing, through countless hardships, stolen from you?" I spent years turning my ideas into reality. Of course, it wasn't always smooth, which is why it took years. Frankly, this development was extremely challenging. When James joined the company, most of the work was already done, so neither of you can truly understand my struggles. To bring this product to life, I used all the technical skills of the development department. This patent is the culmination of all that hard work. They don't understand that stealing it is an insult to every developer. Get out. Please wait, Mike Senpai. I'll work hard from now on. I'll listen to you from now on. Just don't fire me. I won't grant permission to use the patent unless you both are fired. Accepted. My resolve was firm, and nothing they said could change my mind. They had treated me so poorly that their dismissal was inevitable. Though they cried and pleaded, President Beck ultimately fired them. James and Manager David continued to argue bitterly until the end. However, no amount of arguing could reverse their dismissal. From that day forward, they were fired and never returned to work. James had taken 4 years to get into Harvard, causing significant trouble for his family. While it would have been fine if he had worked properly, he was swiftly fired from Beck Holdings, the company he joined after graduating from Harvard. His family, fed up with his failures, disowned him. He then tried to find another job. But no decent company would hire a 26-year-old with a history of dismissal, despite his Harvard degree. Unable to find another job, he struggled with living expenses and ended up working part-time at a corner shop. As for Manager David, or rather just David now, his wife discovered that he had been squandering their savings on affairs. That money had been saved for their retirement, and his wife was furious. She divorced him and demanded repayment of the money he had used. David had very little savings of his own, making it difficult to repay the amount in one lump sum. As a result, David had to pay his wife a fixed amount each month. He tried to find a new job to support himself and make the payments, but he was no longer at an age where re-employment was easy. He started working part-time at night construction, struggling to make ends meet. After that, my resignation was revoked, and I returned to work at Beck Holdings. The patent rights were restored, and the bathing aid equipment I developed was successfully delivered. It is already being used in care facilities, where its convenience is appreciated by many caregivers and residents. "I'm really glad you stayed with us," President Beck said. "I owe a lot to you, President Beck." I had resigned in a fit of anger over what those two did. However, I am grateful to this company for hiring me, a high school graduate. So, I decided to let bygones be bygones and hope to work here until retirement. I also wanted to continue developing products that would delight our clients.
I thought this place was full of talented people, but it turns out there's a middle school grad among us. These were the words of our new manager during his first introduction. From that moment, I decided that I didn't like the manager. As someone who values academic credentials, having a subordinate who's only finished middle school must have been displeasing to him. And with the arrival of the manager, my fate took a drastic turn. Well, I have my own thoughts on this. My name is Tyler. I'm a 32-year-old company employee. I work in product development and research, and recently, I obtained a patent for some technology one developed. Being young and having a patent, I even got interviewed by a specialty magazine. What I developed was an antibacterial and antiviral fabric. Right when I developed this, an infectious disease started spreading, and masks disappeared from the market. So, we quickly decided to use this technology to make masks. I wanted to evolve this fabric into something for medical use. But, due to the company's direction, we ended up making masks with this technology. The technology was patented and became a topic of conversation. Since masks were scarce, they sold well, even at a higher price. The factories we partnered with got busy, and we sold units in the billions over a few years. However, it's difficult to handle, and I often get inquiries as the developer. That's when there was a personnel change. Our department's manager was replaced. The new manager who came in was, in a word, an elitist about academic backgrounds. Up until then, no one had ever brought up educational backgrounds, but when it comes to academic credentials, I feel uneasy. Moreover, the manager saw right through me. When the manager said during his first greeting, "There's a middle school grad among us," something changed in our department. The development department, being a prestigious section that gathers highly educated employees, naturally led everyone to assume that all members had college degrees. However, the manager's words started a hunt for who the middle school grad was. It didn't take long for them to find out it was me. "So the middle school grad that the new manager was talking about was you?" I was taken aback when a colleague, who until then had talked to me normally, said this. I had been avoiding the topic of educational background, so hardly anyone knew about mine. But the manager is big on academic credentials, and had checked everyone's educational background by looking at resumes when he took office. The truth is, I dropped out of high school. As a child, I was called a prodigy, always topping my class in middle school. My father was a university professor, and I took it for granted. I attempted a competitive high school on my father's advice. However, I caught a cold the day before the exam and failed to perform well, resulting in a failed entrance exam. I went to a local high school instead, where I was laughed at by those around me. Gradually, going to school became more difficult for me. By my senior year of high school, I had stopped attending and completely shut myself in. During the summer of my senior year, my father, furious that I wouldn't leave my room, told me if I didn't want to go, I should just quit high school. I blamed my father for insisting I apply to a competitive school, believing that if he hadn't, I would have applied to a different school from the start. Stubbornly, I snapped back that I would quit high school. Living at home became uncomfortable, and I left, almost like running away. However, needing money to live, I found a factory where I could work and live in, and somehow got hired. This was a textile factory, which also marks the beginning of my current career path. As I worked, various questions and points for improvement came to mind, and I began to research on my own. I submitted my research results to my boss, not expecting much. At first, I was ridiculed, but my boss's demeanor changed after reading the documents. This became the first step towards patenting the technology. After that, I joined my current department at the age of 20, and since then, I've been dedicated to product development and research. Having produced results from my development work for 12 years, I never thought I would be looked down upon for my educational background. Once it became known, however, other employees and seniors started to look down on me, just like the manager. Originally, being the youngest, I didn't really fit in with the others and felt out of place in the department. Working wasn't an issue, but because of this manager, it finally started to affect my job. Some people even ask me out of curiosity, "Why did you drop out of high school, Tyler?" But I didn't want to answer, so I dodged the question. Then, gradually, I started to be talked about behind my back. I had truly developed patent-worthy technology, but it seems they thought a high school dropout couldn't possibly do such a thing. There were even accusations that I had stolen someone else's research. When a senior casually said, "Come on, there's no way a high school dropout could develop this, right?" I felt despair. I lost confidence in being able to continue here. As the rumor spread, the scrutiny from those around me intensified. Finally, I was called in by the manager. "Because of you, the atmosphere in the department is the worst. Having a high school dropout here seems to be a bad idea after all," the manager said with a smirk. "Having a high school dropout as my subordinate is also embarrassing for me," the manager said, taking advantage of my silence to say whatever he wanted. Then he told me, "I'm giving you a choice, being transferred to another department or leaving this place. Does that mean I'm being fired?" I asked the manager, who laughed and said, "I didn't say fired. How about transferring to another department? Though, your salary will decrease. The sales department has commissions, and they don't need academic degrees there. Or maybe, transfer to the factory where academic degrees are even less of a requirement." I snapped at those words, impulsively retorting, "Are you looking down on other departments? Without the sales team, the products we develop wouldn't sell. And without the people working in the factory, the products wouldn't be made, would they? What are you talking about?" The manager laughed heartily at me. "Covering for each other because of your low academic backgrounds? Ridiculous. Listen, academic degrees are necessary. People with high academic degrees like me are the real winners." Then the manager said, "I'll give you 3 days to decide," and left. I talked to Sam in the sales department about this. Sam is the same age as me and the ace of the sales department. We hit it off at the first social gathering and have been the only ones in the company to keep in touch privately. The sales department is full of young people. Sam has real ability and looks after his subordinates. We have opposite personalities, but somehow we get along well. Sam is studious and has asked me a lot about my patented technology. He can explain things to clients that other salespeople can't, so it seems he's pushing this product more than anyone. Additionally, a certain medical manufacturer that Sam is in charge of has expressed interest in further evolving the technology. And I was interested to hear more. However, I decided to leave the company. Sam seemed disappointed, but after hearing my situation, he didn't try to stop me. 3 days later, I handed over the documents to the manager, saying, "Thank you for everything." This is the handover documentation. It included the development history and future prospects. Regardless of the manager and those in the same department who turned their backs, I was grateful to the company for hiring me, a high school dropout, and assigning me to this department. I created the handover document hoping the company would continue to develop. But when the manager took it, without even checking inside, he said, "I don't need this," and, unbelievably, tore it up and threw it away. Then, turning to a nearby employee, he said, "Hey, shred this," and the employee, holding the torn documents, immediately went to the shredder. I felt so frustrated I was on the verge of tears. The manager, grinning, said, "High school dropouts should disappear along with the trash." When I clenched my lips, it seemed to amuse him even more, and he laughed harder. "If I need help, I'll ask an employee with a high academic degree. There's nothing I need to take over from you." Hearing that, I felt a moment of clarity in the manager's consistent attitude. It was almost refreshing. I simply said, "Is that so?" and went to complete my resignation. A comment from a coworker in the same department. "I guess it really is impossible here for a high school dropout, huh?" struck me as I walked away. The day after I resigned, I found myself in Sam's car, heading to a hot spring resort. Upon learning of my official resignation, Sam took some leave to take me on a trip. While soaking in the hot spring, Sam said, "Man, our company is stupid. To drive away someone with talent like you, over something as trivial as academic background." I muttered, "It's not really about talent," but Sam shook his head. "With the technology you developed, a revenue of $300 million isn't a dream. In fact, since getting the patent, our sales have skyrocketed, and the company's performance has recovered. It was quite down for a while." I said, "But, with the infectious disease calming down, we can't expect more sales without a new product or new technology." Sam made a troubled face and said, "Yeah, that's true." After getting out of the hot spring and checking my smartphone, I noticed several missed calls. Looking at the screen, I was shocked. "What's this?" Sam peered over, his eyes widening in surprise. There were 100 missed calls from the manager. Out of caution, I decided to check the voicemail. It said, "Come to the office right now, there's a journalist here who wants to interview you." I remembered there had been a request for an interview about the patent. But I thought it had been dismissed because the manager hadn't taken it seriously. The journalist had interviewed me before, so they should have had my contact information. I considered explaining the situation to the journalist. Then, I noticed there were more voicemails. Inquiries about the patent technology. The others can't handle it. Contact us immediately, followed by a rather condescending message. While I was processing this, another call came in. As I was debating whether to turn it off, Sam said, "Just turn off your phone," so I thought that made sense and turned it off. After a while, Sam's work smartphone started ringing. It seemed to be a call from one of his subordinates, asking if he knew how to contact me. When Sam asked why, the subordinate explained that the manager had become panicked, searching for anyone who could contact me, and had been barging into various departments. The manager had ordered to contact even those who were off, so, reluctantly, the subordinate had called Sam. Sam explained, "I'll respond if the manager calls me directly." I didn't want to drag Sam into this and offered to call the manager myself, but Sam refused. Soon after, Sam got a call from the manager. "Get in touch with that high school dropout immediately," he ordered Sam, who he barely knew. He's always been that kind of person, but he must be in quite a panic now. When Sam put the call on speaker to hear what was happening, the manager said, "There seems to be a trouble at the factory, and they're saying only he can handle it. Also, a client has questions about the technology, and since he was in charge, nobody else can give a detailed explanation." It seems that not only was there a journalist wanting an interview, but also a factory issue happening at the same time. "But Tyler has already resigned, hasn't he?" "It seems like you forced him into resigning," Sam said. The manager retorted, "It doesn't matter if he's resigned, it's his fault for not properly handing things over. Besides, I offered him a transfer to another department. He chose to resign." I stopped Sam from replying and spoke up. "You're the one who tore up the handover document." Recognizing my voice, the manager yelled, "Where are you and what are you doing? I've left so many voicemails telling you to come quickly." I just sighed. "I have no reason to follow orders from you anymore, since you're no longer my boss. Everything you're troubled with was written in the handover documents, the very ones you shredded so meticulously." After saying that, the manager was at a loss for words. "Besides, your department is full of highly educated employees, right? There's no need to ask someone like me, a high school dropout. You were the one who said it, manager, that there's no need for a handover because you can ask the highly educated employees." Sam, standing beside me, crossed his arms and nodded in agreement. Since the manager didn't say anything, I continued. "About the interview mentioned in the voicemail, I've already contacted the journalist. They want to interview you next." Me, the manager sounded confused. I smiled and replied. After I explained the circumstances of my leaving, the journalist mentioned it might constitute power harassment and that there might be a case of wrongful termination. "So they're interested in interviewing you?" After listening to the manager's voicemails, I directly called the journalist. The journalist felt sorry that I had left and, upon hearing the circumstances, said they wanted to help me somehow by proposing an interview with the manager. The journalist is kind but somewhat aggressive, so I believe they will indeed contact the manager. This could be damaging for the manager if it becomes public knowledge. Power harassment and wrongful termination. If the company finds out, my position will be jeopardized. The manager started panicking. However, I simply responded, "That's tough." Then Sam said, "Well, it's uncertain what will happen to the company itself. So you might not need to worry about your position anymore." The manager replied, but Sam said, "Then, we'll be excusing ourselves," and hung up. What does that mean? When I expressed my surprise, Sam turned to me and said, "You haven't decided on where to move next, have you?" I had been feeling too down to start looking for another job. After I answered, Sam nodded. "Remember the medical manufacturer I mentioned before, the one interested in the technology you developed? What about them?" I was taken aback by the unexpected offer. Sam had spoken to the medical manufacturer about me, and they were eager to have me join them. "By the way, I'm planning to move there too. And I'm bringing some of my team members with me. Well, our company puts a heavy burden on the sales department, and many are thinking of leaving. With Tyler gone and no one being able to handle inquiries, a drop in sales and performance is inevitable. It'll be interesting to see what happens to the company," Sam said with a laugh. Then, incredibly, I got a call from my dad. He had seen the article about me getting the patent and called me his pride and joy. We hadn't spoken properly in over 10 years, but he said he told me to quit high school thinking it would spur me to action. He wanted to apologize for leaving home but never found the right time until now. I also apologized to my dad. I had misunderstood him and unfairly blamed him for my exam failure, making me a shameful son. Reconciling with my dad and having hope for my new job, I felt refreshed. A few days later, the journalist who interviewed the manager contacted me. Thanks to that, the manager's power harassment and wrongful termination became rumors within the company. And it seems the manager was called in by the president. It seems he's being transferred to another department and demoted. Since he was part of those who looked down on me. Whether work became difficult or jobs were lost. The department's people who took over the inquiries in my stead seemed to be messing up. Angering clients with incorrect information, and losing potential new deals. Sam watched all this unfold before he resigned. After that, the performance of the department visibly worsened. I received a settlement for the power harassment and wrongful termination. I'm satisfied with that. Now, I'm developing technology useful for medical institutions at my new job. Here, there's no one who looks down on others for their educational background, and there are trustworthy people of my own age. I'm grateful to Sam and want to do my best here.